And MPs raising concerns over the UK's shortage of vets. In a letter sent to the Environment Secretary, the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee says that the domestic vet shortage has worsened since the estimate of 11.5% made in 2018, and while there is currently no clear picture of the scale or nature of the shortages, it follows they'll be taking evidence with people from the veterinary sector. We can now speak to Neil Hudson, MP for Penrith and the Border, who's on the committee and is a vet himself and joins us now. Hi, Neil.
Hi there. How are you today?
I'm very good. I'm very good. So this is you're concerned about the shortage of vets, but we're not sure how many we are short.
That's right. Yeah, the figures that we had were back from about 2018. So what we decided to do on the EFRA Select Committee was to have an emergency session purely on veterinary issues. I was able to chair that session, and we looked at that. And we don't have clear numbers now as to what the shortage is, but all the inputs from the veterinary profession is that we are short across the board, whether that's in companion animal practice, so cats, dogs, horses, etc., farm animal practice, but also in terms of research, teaching, but very importantly in terms of public health, meat hygiene and biosecurity. So we wanted to look at it closely and shine a light on that and make recommendations to government as to what we can do to try and bolster the workforce.
And obviously anyone who's trained to be a vet, it takes a very long time. So if there is a chronic shortage now, how long would it be before you can seek to address it?
There's 2 points there, Matt. Yeah, you're right. It takes 5-6 years for the basic training to be a veterinary surgeon. So there are recruitment issues in terms of getting the numbers of people into the profession. But very importantly, as with other professionals in terms of dentists, doctors, GPs, nurses, etc., it's retention in the profession as well. And unfortunately, we've seen quite a rate of attrition in the veterinary sector in recent years. So we've got to recruit more vets, got to train more vets, but we've got to keep them in the system as well. Now, there are new vet schools online, which we as a committee very much are welcoming. There are newer vet schools at the University of Central Lancashire, Harper Keele Vet School. Our committee went up and visited that as well. And there's a new vet school coming online with Scottish SRUC up in Aberdeen as well. But as you say, it takes a few years. And so we need to try and increase the numbers in the system, but very much importantly is when they are out in practice and in other forms of veterinary medicine, we want to try and retain them. So that's some of the things that we looked at in the session. What are the stresses and strains on the veterinary profession making people leave the profession? And I'm a veterinary surgeon myself, and I've seen some of those pressures myself. My journey into politics started with my experiences in the foot and mouth crisis in 2001, when vets from different sectors were deployed into the front line. And I saw sights then I never want to see again in my lifetime. And we've got to be resilient. We've got to make sure that we are capable of addressing an infectious disease outbreak like that in the future. But we've got to make sure for animal health and welfare, but also human public health, that we have a sufficient veterinary workforce.
It's interesting. We had a message in from Malcolm. He said, my daughter wanted to be a vet from the age of 6. She succeeded, and when she left the Royal Veterinary College, she had a £120,000 student debt. During her training, she spent 6 months in New Zealand, where vets are respected, Malcolm says. Working in the UK, all she hears is how vets rip people off and endures the fallout from the negative campaign in the press. Oddly, she's off to New Zealand. One reaps what one sows. Maybe treat vets with a bit more respect. I wonder what you think about that.
I think there's definitely some resonance in that. And another inquiry that we did on the EFRA Select Committee was on mental health and rural mental health. And we looked specifically as well at mental health of people in the agricultural sector, but also in the veterinary profession. And in the veterinary sector, unfortunately, there's higher incidences of mental health issues and sadly higher incidences of suicide as well. And so there are lots of pressures and strains. And actually, vets in recent years have come under a lot of abuse from the general public. It would seem quite strange that people who love their animals actually sometimes take it out on vets. But through the course of the pandemic, 6 out of 10 small animal vets reported some form of abuse from clients as well. There's a new spotlight on charging. The CMA, the Competitions and Markets Authority, is undergoing an inquiry in terms of charging, and vets and receptionists and nurses in the front line are copping a lot of that flack from people saying you're overcharging us. And actually, I think that puts a lot of stresses and strains on people in the profession. You mentioned student debt, and we looked at that. We had the principal of the Royal Veterinary College before us, who represents the Veterinary Schools Council. And actually, the amount of debt that students are incurring to go through their 5 or 6 year degree plan is quite large as well. So we've talked about, is there some way of some debt relief or loan amnesty for vets who go into high need sectors, such as in the public health arena, meat hygiene, or in rural communities as well. And certainly, you mentioned Australia and New Zealand. Vet schools and governments there are actually looking at that to see, well, what can we do to incentivize people to stay in the profession and go into areas where we need them most?
It's really, really interesting. Is it also just the fact that, I mean, particularly as a result of the pandemic, lots and lots of people got dogs, especially.
Absolutely.
So there's a shortage of vets, but actually we need more of them because there were more people who've got pets, and maybe people took them on not realising how much the vets' bills were going to be.
Absolutely. You're exactly right, Matt. During the pandemic, people, through whatever situation, they were at home and working from home, took that opportunity to say, well, is this a good time for us to get a puppy? And there's something called the pandemic puppy syndrome. So a lot of people took on dogs, especially, and actually when they've gone back to work, not really realizing, how much of a commitment it is to look after them. So there was a surge in pet ownership. So you're right, we don't have enough vets out there to look after them. And there's also more people with animals. Yeah. So we need vets across the board for animal health and welfare, for public health. And that's why our committee wanted to shine a spotlight, make recommendations to government to see what can be done. The Secretary of State took that on board. When he was the Health Secretary, he instituted the NHS Workforce Plan. And that's something that we're looking for, is say, well, hang on, how many vets do we need? Can we have a workforce plan for the veterinary sector moving forwid?
Really interesting. Neil Hudson, really appreciate your time today. Neil Hudson, Conservative MP for Penrith and the Border, who's on the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee, which has written to the Environment Secretary, Steve Barclay, warning about the shortage of vets.